Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to another episode of the LDM show. We're back with Brother Hamza. Assalamu alaikum, bro.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
You good?
Very good, alhamdulillah.
Okay, so bro, this week's show, inshallah, we're going to be discussing, does science lead to atheism?
Yes.
Right. So what's your take on it?
Does science lead to atheism? No, it doesn't. It's a malformed question. The reason I'm saying this is because we have to understand what science is. I know, yes, science, we have keyhole surgery, we are taking videos, and we have technology in the iPhone and BlackBerry and all this technology. Alhamdulillah. But it doesn't follow now, since we're getting so many benefits from science, therefore, God doesn't exist, because we have this kind of socialization that since science is doing everything for us, we don't need God anymore, right? And that's a bit of a social fallacy in a way.
The fallacy is all yours and in form of a straw man. You see, first of all, God was never required, i.e. the belief in God was never required. It was merely inserted as an answer to the questions about natural phenomenon, which were not understood at the time, i.e. possibly due to children around the campfire asking why or how does this happen sort of thing. So, the fact that it is a lie doesn't make over for the fact that it is worthless. It has no value. It is no more than white noise in answering a question because it is completely and utterly bogus, So, yeah, there's that issue. Secondly, the way in which the acceptance of the scientific method should lead to a lack of belief is not in the actual conclusions, but rather the methodology of itself. Therefore, to accept science is to reject God at the current. So there are just those issues with your video and your opening statement to begin with. Greetings and welcome there, people of YouTube. This is Essence of Thought here. Of course, I'm doing another video response to the LDM channel, which is a video labelled Science Does Not Lead to Atheism. So without further ado, let's get straight into it.
Now, what we have to understand is what science is. Now, science is a method of study, and it can only deal with the things that it observes. It can only deal with the physical world, with the real physical world. It can't deal with metaphysics. Sure. It can't deal with things like even mathematics. It requires mathematics, do you see? Like logical truth. Science doesn't deal with logical truth. That's philosophy. Why is 1 + 1 necessarily true? That's beyond the scientific method, do you see? Right. So science, from that perspective, heavily relies on a certain worldview and a certain method, if you like, of thinking. One is called empiricism as a theory of knowledge, a worldview of knowledge, a theory of knowledge.
I'm not particularly happy here about the lack of detail. You see, empiricism when dealing with science is basing our thoughts solely off the physical evidence that our senses can collect. However, in the field of philosophy, thoughts and aspects are always being refined, and now, today, in modern science, what is very much accepted is evidentialism. I think of it like empiricism 2.0. You see, it's very refined, and it's been dragged over towards rationalism. It puts more rational thought into what the evidence shows, what the evidence means, and how it can be argued. So, yeah, I think that would have been good to mention.
The other one is a methodology or a thinking process called induction. Now, induction, very simply put, is that you have a limited set of data.
Because we do. This is academic honesty.
And you conclude for the next observation or for the entire set of observations. So you have something historic that you've observed. Say you've seen 1,000 white sheep. And therefore you say the next sheep I'm going to find is going to be white, or all sheep are white.
So there's always room for error.
There is room for error because induction is probabilistic. It's based on 0 to 99% probability. Sure. Because how do you know? You may have another observation that goes against your past observations. Sure. And this happens in science all the time. It's changing based upon these new observations that we're discovering.
And here we come to the concept of falsification, an idea developed by Karl Popper. You see, rather than just having an alternative hypothesis, i.e. H1, we also have the null hypothesis, i.e. H0. What we are attempting to do is disprove or falsify the null hypothesis, i.e. H0, therefore proving the alternative hypothesis, i.e. H1, through falsification. The common example here is the idea that all swans are white. Now, it is impossible to falsify the concept that there possibly could be somewhere a black swan. You could examine all the swans you could lay your hands on, and someone could just make the argument, well, the next one you examine is going to be a black swan. However, it would only take a single African black swan to falsify the concept that all swans are white. Therefore, the concept that all swans are white is the null hypothesis, and the idea that there is a black swan or a swan of a different colour, the alternative hypothesis. Now, of course, it has been proven today that there are black swans. Therefore, the null hypothesis that all swans are white is rejected. It is falsified, and the alternative hypothesis that there is a black swan out there is accepted. This is how the concept of falsification works. If it is unfalsifiable, it is unscientific. This is a very watered down sense of the philosophy behind everything and the whole methodology of science. So, if you want to go do more reading on it, I certainly suggest reading some Karl Popper. However, rather than trying to portray the way that science is not dogmatic and accepts new evidence and goes with the evidence as a bad thing, why don't you move on to arguments for your God?
So just as a side note to bring in, so if someone comes and says, for example, evolution is 100% true and makes such a claim.
No, they could never say such a claim because evolution is a product of the scientific method, and the scientific method is probabilistic based on induction and empiricism, all these things that we'll talk about now. They could say, I have good reasons to believe in it. They could say, I'm 80% true, but they could never say it's 100% true.
Firstly, it is reasons to accept, not reasons to believe. The scientists don't go around believing stuff that they want. They go around accepting stuff based upon the evidence that is presented to them. Secondly, no scientific individual claims to have 100% certainty or something. But we are dealing with such a slim probability of the concept being false, e.g. that the universe does not exist. That is how certain we are. We are as certain behind the theory of evolution as we are that the universe does in fact exist. That is our level of certainty here. This is due to the fossil evidence, the genetic evidence, due to the taxonomical evidence, observable evidence, and testable evidence, i.e. the fact that every time a fossil is dug up, there is a chance that it could falsify the scientific theory of evolution, e.g. if we found a primordial poodle. However, so far, the theory of evolution has stood the test of time and has not been falsified.
They must always entertain an element of doubt. And every sincere academic scientist, whether religious or not, if he's atheist even, would say, we can't say, I won't bet my life on it, basically. Yeah.
Well, the fact is we actually do. You see, all of those new vaccines that you get, all of those new antibiotics, are all based off the principle that pathogens are continuously evolving just like everything else. There would be no point behind them or behind taking them if pathogens did not evolve. You can merely wipe them all out at once, and that would be that. However, by accepting the theory of evolution, we understand that these things will continue to change to overcome our current antibiotics at a certain point. So yes, we do bet our life on it.
Take the expansion of the universe. They thought this was almost 100% true.
Yes.
Recently, there was some cosmologists saying, well, maybe it's not expanding anymore. Do you see?
Yes.
So it's changing based upon observations and the way you see things. Sure. And that's the limitation of induction from that perspective, that even David Hume, the Scottish skeptic philosopher, he actually elucidated this and said, look, how do you know that just because you've seen all these things in the past, your next perception or observation is going to agree with what you've seen in the past?
Sure.
It may not. It may agree with the past observations, or it may not. But usually, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does.
Right.
Only the religious would see lack of dogmatic belief as negative or bad. And that speaks a lot about you guys and what you guys stand for.
So that's the first point, induction.
Sure.
The other point is the theory of knowledge called empiricism. Now, what is empiricism? It's not greatly defined. There's been a debate between the crude, hardcore empiricists and the soft empiricists. But let's just be general here. Empiricism is the theory of knowledge that you can only know knowledge about something or concept about something if it's observable.
Sure.
Okay? So, take for instance a white cat going into a snowstorm.
Sure.
It goes into the snowstorm. Where's the white cat?
Well, you can't observe it anymore.
We can't observe it, so according to a crude approach, you'd be like, well, knowledge about something can only be with direct observation, therefore we have to suspend judgment or say there is no white cat in the snowstorm.
Right.
Except for the prior observation that it went into the snowstorm. Whether it's still alive or not is another matter.
But empiricists recently have also changed the definition by saying, well, it could be indirect observation as well. So they would say, well, it's more likely to be in the snowstorm because it was heading that way. We have previous observation that's indirect that leads us to the fact that the white cat is in the snowstorm.
I don't know what the hell you are talking about, because in research the term indirect observation is used for eyewitness report. So, yeah. However, in your explanation, it seems to be heading towards evidentialism, the method that was developed to overcome some of the issues of empiricism. Remembering that the field of philosophy is always changing and adapting and improving itself. It doesn't claim to have all the answers perfectly now. That is the field of theology. Philosophy does not change to get away from the God conclusion. It changes to give us a better answer. The fact that it possibly may lead away from the God conclusion should tell you something about said conclusion.
Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because if we understand induction and empiricism, we will realize
that you guys know nothing about the topics you talk about, or deliberately seek to leave out evidentialism or falsification.
Wait a minute. Science can't even deal with the God question directly. It can't, because God is by definition unobservable. He's outside of the physical universe. Therefore, you can't use empiricism or induction to reject or accept God. But you can use science as supporting evidence.
Evidentialism. So yes, existence is part of the field of science. However, it has to be operated in the right way around. You see, existence is unfalsifiable. However, non-existence is falsifiable. Let's go back to our swan analogy earlier. The null hypothesis was not that, black swans exist, because there would be no way to falsify this. Someone could just go, well, you haven't found a black swan yet, or the next swan may be black. However, the concept that all swans were white could easily be falsified by the provision of a singular black swan. Similarly, when dealing with God, the idea that God exists cannot be falsified, because the moment that you would claim this, someone could go, well, he's invisible, or, he just exists outside the realms of measurement. Therefore, the null hypothesis cannot be the existence of God. Therefore, the null hypothesis is the opposite, the non-existence of God. Why? Because this is easy to falsify, or at least it should be if there was any evidence for God. The fact is, you could provide that evidence for God, falsifying the null hypothesis of non-existence, therefore accepting the alternative hypothesis of the existence of God. So far, you guys have all failed. So, yeah, that is why the lack of belief in God is the default position in the philosophy of science.
That's why, for example, we use the design argument. There are physical laws in the universe and physical constants that they have been placed within a narrow range of values that if they changed even by a hair's breadth, you would never have a life-permitting universe. We wouldn't be here.
And that begs the question then, why are these laws and constants so
yes,
finely tuned?
exactly. Why are they so finely tuned? So we would say, well, you know what? Based on something called epistemic probability, it's more likely there was some kind of cosmic designer.
The narrow range you describe is anything but, and is a perpetual lie being passed on from scientifically illiterate apologists to scientifically illiterate apologists. You see, I pulled apart this argument in a previous video which dealt with a Muslim creationist video. That will be linked down below. So, if your premises are false, what does that mean about your conclusion?
So we can use evidence, but science as a method can never reject God at all.
Right. So
how? God by definition is unobservable. You need metaphysics, you need philosophy, you need rational thinking, not just crude empiricism and just based on direct or even indirect observation. But as I said, you can use science as supporting evidence for the existence of God.
Pick one and stick with it. Either go, I'm a dogmatic idiot who rejects science, therefore my beliefs are based off nothing but faith, or go, I accept science and therefore I will accept the methodology of falsification and the burden of proof that rests upon me, the believer, to prove that God exists. You cannot have both. This is like in the last video where the guys were going, oh, we don't need to prove God exists, but it's proven. Just pick one, please, and stick with it.
So what we're saying is that as far as science is concerned, which is a good method but it's limited, and as far as it comes to the question of God, it cannot directly prove or disprove the existence of God. It can indirectly, through observations, and we can come for example, the design argument and so on and so forth, we can prove or show that there's more evidence.
Yes, basically what we want to show, if we understand what science is based upon and what tools and methods and theories of knowledge that scientists use, such as empiricism and induction, if we understand these properly,
which you clearly do not, as has been displayed throughout this video,
we would realize that actually no sincere scientist can say science has disproved God.
And no scientist has said that. However, what they have stuck to is through your theistic inability and the inability of your God to provide evidence of his existence, there is no reasonable or rational premise to accept the existence of God. May I point out the fact that, as a human, I can provide very basic evidence for my existence. This video to you guys proves that I exist. Therefore, your God cannot even do on par with what I, a human, can do. Isn't that kind of awkward considering you describe your God as being all-powerful?
Sure.
That is an unscientific assertion.
Right.
And that's the point.
Sure.
So we have to actually take this very serious into consideration, because you have the likes of Richard Dawkins, who basically says, you know, science leads to atheism.
Right.
But it doesn't.
Yes.
But they do, not through deductive conclusion, but through the very methodology of science itself and your inability to challenge the null hypothesis. Therefore, what you're attempting to do is construct a false position of both Dawkins and science and play them off one another, when a basic understanding of both fields would completely clear that fallacy up.
Your view on the data, your interpretation of the data leads to your atheism,
Yes.
but someone could use the same evidence and actually allow it to lead them to theism.
Sure.
However, beyond cognitive bias, the methodology is all too clear as to which position is philosophically and scientifically sound.
Now, I just want to address this final point. Just because we know how the universe works, it doesn't mean God doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, this is key.
Yeah, because what a lot of atheists do, they conflate, they mistake the how with the why. For example, how do earthquakes happen?
Yes.
Tectonic plate theory, right? So we know the how. But do we know the why?
Well, in my view, there is no why to that, there is only the how. You see, tectonic plates are not some bloodthirsty rock that hungers for human flesh. That why only exists with the acceptance of your God.
No, that's a religious question. For example, Islam would say maybe God has done this to test us, to see if we are compassionate enough to help the victims, for example.
Oh yes, let me just kill a load of fucking people and see the results and judge them upon that. Let us just forget the whole loss of life, the psychological trauma of the survivors, and the setbacks in development that this causes. Well done.
Take another example. The car. How is the car made? How does it work?
Yes.
You have an engine, you have spark plugs, you have combustion, X, Y, and Z. Why? Because someone designed it that way. Sure. Or someone was to drive the car. Do you see?
Yes, because why is a human concept, and therefore is a reason we project it onto an anthropomorphic deity. And in the beginning, man created God in his image.
The how and the why are not the same thing. And this is something that Professor Hoodboy from Pakistan, he's a bordering atheist, I believe. He used to be part of Lum's University, one of a prestigious university in Pakistan. And he wrote the book Religion and Rationality. He does the same thing. He conflicts the how with the why. He says, how can you believe in this book, Quran? Because the Quran says that earthquakes happen because of God's punishment or a test for us, right? And he says, but we know now it's because of tectonic plate theory. I said, hey, hold on a second, that's a fallacy. You're conflating the how with the why.
No, the fallacy is a deep-set equivocation fallacy that occurs because our cognitive mind does not like the concept that there are extraneous variables, uncontrolled events occurring, i.e. that shit happens. Therefore, when something bad happens or disaster strikes, we do ask why. Not because there was any actual intended purpose behind it, but because we project ourselves onto it. Bloody hell, I'm beginning to sound like Uncle Kage in this video.
Because, take for example, my children. How did my wife give birth? How did she give birth? We have the sperm that mixes with the egg, it forms a blastocyst, it sinks into uterine wall, and you have the process of embryology, right? That's the how. But why is because I find her attractive, mate. Yes. Or because she's my wife. And I'm human, and I'm human, and I'm human, and I'm human, and I'm human.
Anthropomorphism. attribution of human motivation, characteristics, or behavior to inanimate objects, animals, or natural phenomena.
Right? That's the why. So the how and the why are two different things. And you know what was so funny? They do this all the time. Even Ian Bryce, he's the vice chairman for the head of the Secular Society or something, or the Secular Party in Australia, in Sydney. He did the same thing. He said, we know the 4 laws of nature. God doesn't exist. Well, we appreciate the 4 laws of nature. And God uses them to bring about his will.
Yes.
So you're conflating the how with the why.
Right. So that's very important. So just to clarify, just because we understand how certain things may function.
Are you clarifying because you think I'm too complicated?
No, I'm just.
Are you clarifying because you think I can't communicate
just
with
to
people?
reinforce the point,
Are you being rude?
No, of course not. But just to end, inshallah, is what we're saying is just because we understand the process of how something may work, it doesn't mean there's no external agency in control of the whole process.
Well, it doesn't negate the why.
Okay,
that's
sure.
the point. So don't mix the how with the why.
Right. Jazakallah khair, brother. For another episode.
No, anytime.
Assalamu alaikum.
So 2 responses there. As for the differentiation between the how and the why, stop projecting human traits onto natural phenomena without any evidence. It is traumatizing and demeaning to those who actually went through disasters. Secondly, as for Hussein's more set out clarification, that's not what we believe or the position that we hold. Yet it is up for you to falsify the null hypothesis of science. You must either accept the field as a whole or abandon it. You cannot have a foot in science and a foot out of science. Just getting that out there. So yes, that is the end of the video, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it. It was certainly a pleasure actually doing this one. So yeah, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, because I kept getting invites from people from YouTube on Facebook, I've now actually set up a Facebook page. It's just going to have, me posting my videos. I'm also going to be posting some updates when I'm making a video, as well as some questions as to which way my content should more or less go. So if you do like my content and want a bit more interaction, there is a link down below to my Facebook group, or you can go to my channel. It will also be linked on my channel. So yeah, this is Lesson 4. Take care and out.